in the last 12 months, FemTech in North America raised $527 million. In Europe, $36 million. That's a 14 times gap. But here's the part that bothers me. Europe did 28% of the deals, roughly 1 in 3 pure play FemTech rounds globally, and got 1 in $17. So this isn't a deal flow problem, it's a pricing problem. I'm Piotr Zając, HealthTech Director at Montreal, 14 years building regulated women's health software with companies like Elvie. Joining me today is my dear friend, amazing and powerful woman, Rachel Braun Scherl. Rachel has spent 28 years inside this capital structure, building, selling, advising. She's co-founder of Spark Solutions for Growth, Forbes contributor of FemTech, the original Vagipreneur. And last summer, she co-founded 51end, a network designed to change how women's health actually get founded. Rachel, pleasure to host you today.
It's always great to be with you, Peter. Thank you so much for the kind words and thrilled to be here together after many, many years of collaborating.
Yeah, let's start from this question. Every FemTech panel for the last 3 years has opened with, this is the moment. But when I look at the numbers, global pure FemTech funding hit $753 million in 2024 and dropped to $616 million in 2025, down 18% year over year. Zero major FemTech IPOs since Progeny in 2019, Sequoia, A16Z, General Atlantic. They show up for individual deals, but they're not systematically present in this category. And here's a number that really tells the story. In 2025, fertility and IVF-tech captured 44% of all global FemTech capital. Zoom out further, WEF and BCG published in January that 90% of women's health investment goes into 3 buckets: cancer, reproduction, and maternal health, which means menopause, mental health, cardiometabolic, autoimmune, basically the back half of a woman's life. And most of her actual disease burden is fighting over the remaining 10%. So honest question, are we in a FemTech moment or did we already pass the peak? And is FemTech actually FemTech or is it just IVF-tech?
Don't often use the term FemTech anymore. What I do is use the expression that we are using in the broader ecosystem, certainly in the US, which is things that affect women only, which means you have to have biologically female organs to have an issue with your uterus or to be able to carry a baby or to have concerns about your ovaries, pregnancy, fertility, all those things. That's what we historically called bikini medicine. And that's what for many years, most people thought women's health was. But it's that plus it's things that affect women primarily, which is autoimmune, dementia, Alzheimer's, breast cancer, migraines, lupus, things that are not necessarily female in nature, but affect women. The prevalence of those conditions affecting women are dramatically greater. For instance, 80% of the autoimmune sufferers are women. So that's category 2, things that affect women only, things that affect women primarily. So when I think of women's health, FemTech is almost, to me, a subset, and their umbrella is, makes almost everything FemTech. So the short answer to your question is, once we get the definition down, is the moment hasn't passed. We're still coming up the hill. We've seen a huge amount of interest and investment and growth in menopause. We're starting to see many more conversations on this bigger category, which is much more descriptive, called hormonal health, which isn't just a woman menstruating or trying to get pregnant. It's literally how her hormones function across the entirety of her life, both when she is trying to reproduce and when she isn't. So I still think we're coming up the hill pretty fast. We're not at the top, but we're certainly not on the other side falling down.
And we are talking about 51% of the society globally.
Right. So before I die, I hope no one ever uses the word niche again to describe women's health. So as you said, 51% of the global population are women. They make 80% of the healthcare decisions, 85% of the consumer home purchase decisions. They're often in charge of many aspects of the family. Many people refer to women as the chief medical officer of the family. Women are going to see the biggest transfer of wealth that we've ever seen over the next several decades. So this is not a small or insignificant population. 1.1 billion women are in menopause. Every person born as a woman will go through menopause, either naturally or surgically. There are very few things that affect literally every person of a certain biological makeup on the planet. So I like to do what you call menopause math. If you look at any of these numbers and you start to say, if we are able to develop solutions, which we are developing, and we're able to get people to pay for them, and importantly, if we're able to get insurance companies to reimburse, we're talking about opportunities for some of the largest therapeutic areas we've ever seen. Menopause could dwarf what we're seeing with GLP-1s.
Okay, so you've sat in rooms with investors evaluating probably hundreds of FemTech deals and 28 years of it. So I don't want general patterns. I want you to tell us one mistake, specific, recurring.
The one that makes me want to walk out of the room, and thankfully founders are doing it less and less, is starting with something other than the economic opportunity. Women's health isn't a nice to do. It's the right thing to do. That doesn't fly with investors. That doesn't motivate investors. I'm not saying they don't care about doing the right thing, and I'm not saying that they don't want to make the world a better place. But the biggest mistake I see founders making is presenting a story other than the economic case, meaning how could incorporating product A, solution B in the context of this company, how is it going to solve a problem that currently isn't being solved or solves it in a way that is better? I say it's better, it's faster, it's cheaper, it's longer lasting. And is this something that people say is nice to have or they must have? And you really need to build the economic argument to demonstrate what's the uptake. What are they buying this in place of? Is this a new category? What do the real numbers look like from a growth opportunity? And what is the potential return? An investor who's comparing this potentially in a fund to AI deals or other tech deals. How do you make this an economically strong case that says, when you look at this, this is an opportunity that I shouldn't pass up to make real money?
And it reminded me the story of Tanya Boller, the founder of Elvie. I spent over a decade with Elvie, from when they were 4 people in London to becoming the UK's flagship FemTech brand. I think the best in Europe. I worked closely with the entire team and they changed how I think about technology, that the best work we do is the work that actually help people. So when this happened, it hit me harder than I expected. They raised $186 million, Octopus, BlackRock, Samsung Next on the cap table. In March 2025, unexpected administration. And Willow, who'd sued them for patent infringement 2 years earlier, bought the assets out of bankruptcy. Most of the UK team made redundant. Investors and some founders most likely got nothing. It was brutal in my perspective. And Willow's own CEO admitted publicly, women's health firms don't have many exit opportunities. So I have to ask, are deals like this healthy consolidation, or are they a signal to every European LP, don't bet on FemTech harder again, that will pay for over the next 5 years?
If someone is listening to this who's a European investor, do not run away from FemTech. That wasn't a successful exit. That doesn't mean that all hope is lost and they're not great opportunities. And it's important that you ask the question that way, because what often happens in women's health and with female founders is that you take an example like that and say, okay, that's indicative of what's happening in the entire space. You don't hear that generally. And a male founder has an enormous disaster like WeWork, which had an enormous valuation, just went crashing to the earth. And that same founder was then able to raise a whole lot of money for his next venture. I think the dynamic that you see with women founders is this desire to say, this is a pattern. There must be something wrong with this industry, as opposed to, and I wasn't in the inners of the Elvie or Willow deal, there were some potentially fundamental things wrong with either the business model or with the consumer uptake or with the corporate structure or with the financial management. I think it probably is likely a statement about what was happening in that individual company in that individual statement. One of the reasons that story, besides that it was personal to you, is so disappointing is because they were a high flyer. The founder really started new conversations that weren't being had. She was bringing pelvic health to the conversation as a problem that needed to be solved.
Yeah, and it might be not like a FemTech problem, but maybe the company problem, right? This is the story that we should focus on.
Yeah.
Okay, so last question and two parts. You launched 51end in July 2025, not a fund, not a product, a member-driven network designed to change how women's health gets funded through community, data, advocacy, bipartisan policy, right? And after 28 years building inside the existing capital stack, you're betting that the stack itself isn't enough. So part one, what specifically broke? And part two, selfishly, as a European, if a FemTech founder from Berlin or Warsaw or Krakow walks into your office tomorrow with strong clinical evidence, real product, can close a Series A and asks, where should I build this? Where should I raise? In US or in Europe? What do you tell her?
Okay, so I'll take the first question first in terms of 51and shout out to the visionary and founder of this, Jody Newhouser, who is a brilliant visionary and professional colleague and close personal friend. What 51and was built on was the concept that there are many fundamental systemic infrastructure things broken about women's health. Women live longer, but they live in poorer health. It takes often almost twice as long for conditions to be diagnosed in women. You're looking at anatomically equivalent procedures that demonstrate when the procedure is performed on a female patient, create an annual economic engine. And for every dollar we raise, 80% of it will go back into the ecosystem so that we can fix what's broken with the ultimate objective of having people diagnosed earlier, focusing on prevention, having better health outcomes, costing in employees less lost time, creating better health outcomes, reducing costs for companies, and creating a system where women are living healthier lives as opposed to longer lives, but not in better health. So that's the idea. It's a for-profit organization. Annual membership is $100. I am still one of those believers that the most important thing you have in any environment is the ability to raise capital and drive distribution. For people who are thinking about doing that, where is your best shot at communicating the value of what you're building so that you can elicit investment? And most importantly, when you do that, do you have a channel partners who can help you distribute your product and service and drive revenue? So I don't think there's a flat answer, US versus Europe. I certainly know that dozens of the companies that I work with, one of their primary growth objectives is to come to the US. So I often think being in the US is a when question rather than should it be first or second. But, that will ultimately be included in any true growth company. And we see that certainly in the US companies that have been successful, that they're focused right now on global expansion. So I think you can start either place. Where is the momentum on your side? Where do you have access to founders and funders and sources of business growth? And a lot of that comes down to personal experiences, as well as Europe has done much more on a countrywide or continent-wide level to have government level support, to have funds that are private-public partnerships. So opportunities to say, this is a big problem that's affecting us. And especially you see that in the UK, specifically around menopause, where there's a lot of national interest. So if I were a menopause company or a hormonal health company and I was based in Europe, I would probably start there, demonstrate my model, demonstrate my momentum, and then go to the US and to other geographies where my solution would be meaningful to solve a similar problem or set of problems. So, you asked for a yes or no, Europe versus the US. The answer is yes. I would be asking other questions before I made a flat out decision as to where I should start.
So, Rachel, thank you very much for today. It was a pleasure as always to talk to you. And link to 51and Business of the V and Rachel's Forbes column in the comments below. If you're building or investing in women's health and any of this hit something, send Rachel or me a message and we can continue conversation over there, right?
Yes, thank you so much. And I love collaborating with you, and you're always pushing the conversation and the industry forward. So we need you, and thrilled that you have this much energy for the same things that so many of us are passionate about.
Thank you, Rachel.